What if the car you returned wasn't to the person who owned it? What if in the space between a simple mistake and a silent elevator lobby, your entire life quietly changed direction? This is a story about a man who fixed engines but never expected to touch someone's heart, and a woman whose world ran like clockwork until one day it didn't. Stay with us through every mile, every moment, and every unexpected turn. If you love heartfelt stories about connection, redemption, and the quiet magic of everyday choices, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's a new story waiting here for you every week. Now let's begin. A poor mechanic returned the car to the wrong billionaire. She looked at him and said, "Don't go back." The late afternoon sun cast long, golden slants across the gleaming glass facade of the Sinclair Towers. Cal Bennett squinted as he pulled the freshly detailed Mercedes up to the curb, its engine humming like a well-fed cat. The elevator doors of the high-rise hissed open behind him, releasing a burst of suited professionals, most of them locked into their phones, barely glancing up as they streamed past. Cal ran a calloused hand through his thick brown hair and stepped out, stretching his back from the long hours spent crouched under car hoods. His jeans were clean for once, and the plaid shirt he wore, borrowed from his Sunday drawer, looked almost decent. There was no company logo stitched on his chest, no grease under his nails, nothing that screamed mechanic. Just a regular guy delivering a car. He pulled out the key fob and clicked it. The lights flashed. He looked around, waiting for the client to show. Then she appeared, a woman in heels that clicked like a metronome on marble. Her hair, a dark chestnut cascade, moved like a waterfall behind her. As she walked with determined grace toward him, Cal noticed two things instantly. First, she was stunning in the kind of untouchable way that made people forget how to speak. Second, she looked furious. "Are you the driver?" she asked sharply. Not slowing her stride, Cal blinked. I'm with." "Finally," she said, exasperated, opening the passenger door herself. "We need to leave now." He stood there frozen for a heartbeat too long. "I said now," she repeated, tossing a phone into the cup holder like it had personally offended her. "Drive and don't go back." Cal looked down the curb, half expecting someone else to show up and say, "Sorry, lady, wrong car." But no one did. She was already buckled in. He walked around, slowly got into the driver's seat, and adjusted the mirror. She didn't even glance at him. Maybe this was some elite level of car delivery he wasn't familiar with. Or maybe this was a really strange day. Cal checked the GPS. Where to? She rattled off an address upstate, 2 hours away, rural, off the main roads. His eyebrows rose, but he didn't ask questions. He put the car in drive. The tower and all its mirrored arrogance disappeared in the rearview mirror. 15 minutes into the silence, Cal risked a glance at her. She was staring out the window, jaw tight, arms crossed. The kind of posture that said, "Don't talk to me unless you have the cure for regret." He cleared his throat. "So, you having a rough day?" She looked at him, then sharp green eyes that flicked across his face like she was evaluating his worth in real time. "You could say that," she said, "but it's not your concern." "Fair enough." He nodded and kept his eyes on the road. "But if you're running from a murder scene, you might want to tell me now. I don't do well in court." That earned him a tiny curve at the corner of her mouth. Barely a smile, but enough. "I'm not running from anything," she said after a pause. "Just stepping away." "From what?" "Everything." Cal whistled low. "That's a lot to walk away from." "Then it's good. I had a car waiting, isn't it?" He smiled to himself. He liked her voice, low and controlled, but with cracks hiding underneath like glass under pressure. "You always hijack strangers' cars?" he asked. She tilted her head, finally studying him. "You're not the driver, are you?" "Nope," he said. "I'm a mechanic, Cal Bennett." "You hijacked a guy who fixes radiators for a living." Her hand flew to her forehead. "God, of course, this day." Cal chuckled. "Want me to turn around?" She hesitated longer than he expected. "No," she said finally. "Don't go back." He looked at her again. This time he really saw her. The power suit, the designer, heels, the diamond studs. Yes, but also the faint tremble in her fingers, the pale set of her lips, the vulnerability that no amount of wealth could conceal. "Okay," he said quietly. "We're not going back." The road stretched before them like a ribbon through golden fields. Somewhere around the first hour, the silence began to soften. Lauren, that was her name, opened up in crumbs, not about who she was or what she did, but about the farm she was going to. Her grandmother's old place, abandoned. Now, Cal didn't ask why she needed to be there. He just asked if she wanted music. She surprised him by saying yes. They listened to an old country station that crackled in and out with the hills. She even hummed along once. For a moment, she looked years younger. At a gas station, he insisted on filling the tank. She looked ready to argue but let him. He noticed she didn't carry cash. Only black cards and eyes that darted every time her phone buzzed, still unanswered. Back on the road, the sun dipped lower, painting the windshield in amber. So he asked casually, "What's a woman like you doing? Riding with a man like me?" She looked out the window. "Trying to remember who I was before I started pretending." He didn't respond. Some things didn't need a reply. When they turned off the main road, the gravel crunched under the tires and a faded wooden sign came into view. Sinclair Farmstead, established 1912. The house beyond it was small, worn and quiet, like a place still waiting for someone to come home. Cal parked. Lauren sat there a moment, staring at the porch like it might fall apart if she stepped on it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For driving," he shrugged. "I guess that makes me an accidental chauffeur." She looked at him again, longer this time. "You're not like anyone I've met in a long, long time." Cal smiled. "Well, if you hang around enough garages, you'll find a few more of us." She unbuckled slowly. "I don't know what I'm doing. That makes two of us." She hesitated, then stepped out of the car. But before she closed the door, she turned to him and said softly, "Cal, yeah, don't go back yet." Then she was gone, walking up the creaking steps to the old farmhouse, heels clicking against the ghosts of yesterday. And Cal. He leaned back in the seat, looking at the horizon, wondering what on earth he'd just been pulled into. But deep down, something told him he didn't mind one bit. Cal Bennett had delivered plenty of cars before, new Sea-Cals to entitled executives, aging Buicks to sweet retirees, and once memorably a cherry red Corvette to a man going through his third divorce. But none of those deliveries had ended with him sitting in the driver's seat of a luxury vehicle outside a decaying farmhouse, while a billionaire vanished into her childhood. He sat there for a moment, the engine ticking in the cool evening air. Lauren hadn't said how long she'd be inside. Maybe she just needed a moment. Maybe she'd cry or scream or take off those ridiculous heels and walk barefoot across the porch. Or maybe she'd come back and tell him it was time to go, and this whole thing would be nothing more than a strange memory filed away under rich people or weird. But 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still no sign of her. Cal turned off the engine and got out. The farmhouse looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The paint on the shutters had peeled to gray ribbons and the screen door hung off one hinge. A single swing on the porch creaked in the wind, moving gently like someone had just left it. He walked up the steps cautiously. Lauren, he called no answer. He found her in the kitchen, standing by the sink with her arms wrapped around herself. She wasn't crying, but she looked like someone who had forgotten how. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice low. She turned startled, then nodded. "I didn't think it would hit me like this." Cal looked around. Dust coated everything. The old clock above the stove had stopped at 3:42. A few ceramic mugs sat in the drying rack, as if someone once meant to come back and never did. "My grandmother used to bake peach pies every Saturday morning in this kitchen." Lauren said, her voice somewhere far off. "She kept a tin of cookies on that shelf. Oatmeal raisin, I hated them." Cal smiled. "I had an aunt who made molasses cookies every Christmas. Same story, still feel guilty for feeding them to the dog." That got a laugh, a real one. Short, surprised, but real. It softened her features. For a moment, Cal saw the woman beneath the boardroom armor. "I don't know why I came here." She admitted, "I had a meeting this morning. Board of directors, full press coverage. I was supposed to announce a new EV initiative. Instead, I walked out." Cal leaned on the counter, not too close. "That why you said don't go back?" Lauren nodded. "It's all noise. Suits talking over each other. Deals behind closed doors. I built that company with my father. After he died, I tried to keep it human. But lately," she trailed off, eyes clouding. "You felt like a machine in your own factory," Cal said quietly. She looked up, surprised. Yes, exactly. That silence fell between them again this time. Not heavy, just quiet. Want me to check the power, he asked after a beat. Might be nice to get some lights on in here. Lauren hesitated, then nodded. The box is in the basement, back hallway left. Cal found the fuse box easily enough. A few switches were tripped, probably from storms or age. He flipped them back one by one, and with each click the old house flickered back to life, one dim bulb at a time. When he returned, Lauren had taken off her heels and was barefoot on the wooden floor, looking like a woman slowly remembering who she used to be. He didn't say anything, just handed her a bottle of water he'd grabbed from the car cooler. Thanks, she murmured. You're full of surprises for a mechanic. Cal shrugged. Fixing things is what I do. Sometimes that includes fuse boxes. Sometimes it's people's days. She looked at him curious. You always like this? Like what? Calm, solid kind. Cal scratched his chin. I don't know. I just try not to be the reason someone's day gets worse. Lauren sat down on the edge of the old couch, which groaned under her. Well, today, you're the only part that hasn't been a disaster. Cal took a seat across from her in an old wooden chair. I've had days like that, where everything breaks at once. Did you ever just walk away from it all? He thought for a moment. I walked away from college, mechanical engineering degree. 2 years and my mom got sick, and I couldn't afford both tuition and her meds. So I walked, never looked back. Do you regret it? He shook his head. Not for a second. I didn't get the paper, but I got my hands dirty. Built something with them, fixed things, saved a few people money, made a few friends. Lauren looked down at her hands, manicured, delicate, restless. I don't think I know how to build anything anymore. Well, Cal said, you're standing in the one place where you probably used to. She looked up at him, then past him through the window, where the last light of day lit up the old barn in gold. Would you mind staying a little longer? She asked, just for tonight. Cal raised an eyebrow. You sure I'm not exactly prime dinner company? She smiled, tired but genuine. You're the first person today who hasn't asked me for something that's more valuable than dinner reservations at the Ivy. Cal chuckled. I once had dinner at a Waffle House with a guy who paid me in bacon for fixing his truck. You'd be surprised what passes for a good evening. Then it's settled, Lauren said softly. We'll have a Waffle House night. No boardrooms, no press, no pretending. Cal nodded, and for a long moment neither of them moved. The farmhouse held them like a memory. Quiet, faded, full of stories that hadn't been told in years. And as the night deepened, something small but unmistakable shifted in the space between them. Neither of them said it, but both felt it. They weren't strangers anymore, and maybe, just maybe, they were exactly where they needed to be. Morning light spilled through the cracked windows of the old farmhouse, casting dappled patterns across the floor, like memories waking up. The scent of dust and wood lingered in the air, layered with something unexpectedly comforting: coffee. Cal stood by the old gas stove, coaxing a flame to life. He'd found a half-empty tin of grounds in the pantry, expiration date long forgotten, but it was coffee nonetheless. He smiled as the ancient kettle began to hiss. Some things never changed. Outside, the fog was still lifting off the fields, curling around the edges of the fence that surrounded the property like a fading embrace. Through the kitchen window, he saw Lauren on the porch, wrapped in an old flannel blanket, hair loose and wind-tousled. She looked like a photograph from another time. He brought out 2 chipped mugs, one green, one white, with a faded sunflower. Lauren accepted hers with a nod of thanks. This house hasn't seen coffee in years, she murmured. Figured it was time, Cal said, easing down beside her on the porch swing. It's not gourmet, but it's hot. They sipped in silence, the old boards beneath them creaking gently with each sway. Birds called out from the trees, and somewhere in the distance a cow lowed lazily. The world moved slower here. Or maybe it simply moved more honestly. I used to spend summers here, Lauren said, eyes on the overgrown garden beyond the yard, barefoot dirt under my fingernails. Grandma used to make me weed that whole row of tomatoes. Cal chuckled. Character building. She said it was grounding. Lauren sipped again. Funny how I spent the last 20 years trying to forget this place. And now it's all I want. Cal nodded slowly. Funny how the things we run from end up being the things we need to come home to. She turned to him, studying his face. Did you always know you'd be a mechanic? He shrugged. Not really. I was the kid who took apart toasters and couldn't always put them back together. But there was something about figuring out how things worked, how to make them run again. It stuck. You make it sound simple. It is, he said. Machines are honest. They don't fake. They break and you fix them. People are trickier. Lauren smiled faintly. You ever think about doing more? More, he echoed. You're smart. You've got instincts. You ever think about running a shop, owning something of your own? Cal looked out over the field. I've thought about it. But owning something means you have to protect it, grow it, and some of us, he paused. Some of us spend so much time fixing things for others, we forget we deserve to build something for ourselves. Lauren said nothing for a moment, then she stood. Walk with me. They wandered down the steps and into the field, the grass cool beneath their feet. The old fence that circled the yard was leaning precariously in places, several slats missing others, cowgling by a nail. Cal ran a hand along the warped wood. This fence has seen better days. It's a metaphor, isn't it? Lauren said. For everything. He grinned. Could be. Or maybe it's just a fence. She crouched beside a broken post, brushing dirt off the base. This place could be something, again. Yeah, Cal agreed, it could. I want to fix it, she said suddenly. Not just the house, the land, the barn. The whole thing. I don't know what I'll do with it yet, but I want to make it whole again. Cal raised an eyebrow. That's a big job. I have the resources, she said, but not the hands. He smiled. You asking for mine? I'm asking if you consider staying a while longer, she said, straightening to meet his gaze. Help me get started. Cal looked at her. Not the billionaire in a tailored suit, not the woman who mistook him for a chauffeur, but the person beneath all that. She was raw, searching, trying to reclaim something she'd lost. You sure you want a grease monkey swinging hammers on your ancestral land? He asked. She chuckled. I think I want the man who made coffee in a dead kitchen and fixed my grandmother's fuse box without being asked. He considered it. The logical part of him said this was temporary, a detour, but another part, quieter, deeper, knew this was a crossroad. One of those rare moments where life gently asked, what if you didn't go back? All right, he said finally. But if we're fixing fences, we're doing it right. No shortcuts, agreed, and you're weeding the tomato row. Her laughter rang out like wind chimes in summer air. They spent the rest of the morning assessing the damage, missing boards, rusted nails, a collapsed corner by the old barn. Cal showed her how to brace a post with rope and leverage. She watched, learned, got her hands dirty, her manicure chipped. She didn't seem to care. By noon, they had a section standing upright again. It wasn't perfect, but it held. Lauren leaned on the post, breathing hard. I haven't worked like this in years. Cal handed her a bottle of water. You did good. I'm going to be sore tomorrow. Good sore, he said. Means you earned it. She looked at him, something soft and shining behind her eyes. Thank you for what? For not asking questions I'm not ready to answer. For treating me like I'm not broken. Cal tilted his head. You're not broken, you're just rebuilding. She nodded slowly, then added almost shyly, maybe we both are. And for the first time, Cal felt it too. Not just attraction, not just curiosity, something deeper. A sense that they were two people who, though cracked and weathered, might just fit together like two old boards in a mended fence. As they walked back to the porch side by side in the golden light, Cal found himself thinking, this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just a story to tell later. This might be the beginning of something real. By late afternoon, the farmhouse had taken on a strange kind of warmth, like a long-forgotten friend stirring from sleep. The porch creaked less under their steps now, and the section of fence they'd mended stood proudly like a symbol of something just beginning. Cal found himself lingering more than working, not out of laziness, but because the space between him and Lauren felt delicate, like a tightrope strung between two lives that had never expected to meet. Inside, Cal rinsed his hands in the ancient kitchen sink. The water was brown at first, then clear. He dried off with an old dish towel and caught a glimpse of Lauren sitting on the porch swing again, this time with her phone pressed against her thigh instead of her ear. She hadn't touched it all day. That alone told Cal something was wrong. He stepped outside the late sunlight, gilding the trees in copper and fire. "You okay?" he asked gently. Lauren didn't answer right away. She was staring out toward the hills where the sky met the land. "There are 27 missed calls on this phone," she said finally. 3 from my CFO, 6 from my assistant, the rest from press lawyers, and 1 from Richard. Richard, Cal asked, lowering himself onto the swing beside her. "My fiancé," she said, voice flat, "or maybe not anymore." Cal blinked. "Oh," she turned toward him, half amused by his reaction. "You're allowed to look surprised. I just didn't know there was a fiancé in the picture." "There's not really," she said. "Not in the way that matters. It was a merger more than a romance. Safe, predictable, useful." "That sounds wildly unromantic," Cal offered. Lauren laughed, the sound tinged with something hollow. "Welcome to corporate love. You don't pick someone who makes your heart race. You pick someone who looks good in press photos and knows how to hold a wine glass." He hesitated before asking, "Why'd you say yes?" She turned her phone over in her hand. "Because I was tired. Tired of pretending I wasn't lonely. Tired of being the only woman in a room full of men with opinions and no empathy. I thought maybe if I stopped fighting so hard, things would get easier." Cal didn't say anything. He knew better than to offer comfort too quickly. Some truths didn't need soothing. They needed space. "He doesn't love me," she continued, quieter now. "He loves the version of me that fits next to his name. The polished CEO. Not this girl with splinters in her fingers and dirt under her nails." Cal glanced down at her hands streaked with grime from the morning's work. "I like this version." She looked up at him, startled. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then her phone buzzed again. Lauren flinched and finally picked it up, thumb hovering over the screen. She stared at the caller ID, Richard Morgan, and let it ring out. "I should call him," she whispered. "Do you want to?" Cal asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and walked to the edge of the porch, cradling the phone in both hands. After a long silence, she turned back to him. "You ever wish you could disappear for a while?" "All the time," Cal said, meaning it, "but disappearing only works if you're trying to find something. Not if you're just trying to hide." Lauren nodded slowly. "I thought I was hiding when I left this morning. But now I think I was hoping someone would notice I was gone." Cal rose and joined her. They noticed, but maybe the wrong people. She looked at him then, not as a mechanic, not as a stranger, but as something gentler, steadier. Someone who saw her when she wasn't trying to be seen. "Why are you really still here?" she asked Cal. Hesitated. "Honesty wasn't always easy when you'd spent a lifetime not being noticed, because I don't think you should go through this alone. And maybe because I needed to disappear too." She didn't reply, but the way her shoulders lowered said everything. They sat down again as the sun dipped behind the barn, and the world fell into that quiet hush between day and night. "I used to think healing looked like a spa weekend or a silent retreat," Lauren murmured. "But maybe it looks like this. A broken fence, burnt coffee, a stranger who fixes things without being asked." Cal leaned back. "Maybe it looks like someone finally letting herself fall apart in a place where it's safe to do so." She glanced sideways at him, her eyes soft but guarded. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," he said. The phone buzzed again. This time she powered it off completely. "I think I'm done taking calls today," she said, and something about that so simple, so final, felt like the first brick in a new foundation. Cal didn't cheer, didn't congratulate. He simply sat beside her as the porch swing swayed gently beneath him. It wasn't a grand moment, no dramatic music, no kiss in the rain, but it was real, and sometimes real was the bravest thing of all. That night after she went inside, Cal stayed out on the porch alone. He stared up at the stars, arms draped over the back of the swing mind, humming with questions he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. What happens when you fall for someone who doesn't know if she's staying? What happens when you start to hope? From the upstairs window, a warm light glowed. Cal smiled to himself, slow and quiet. Maybe for now it was enough just to be here. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe she deserved more than a life of polished lies. By evening, the farmhouse had fallen into that kind of quiet that only old country places know, the hush of fields, gone still wind rustling through forgotten trees, the distant call of a night bird. Somewhere beyond the barn, Cal stacked the last of the dry firewood by the porch steps. The logs were weathered but dry enough to burn, and he figured the place could use a little warmth. There was no central heat, and the night air had turned crisp with the promise of autumn. Inside, he found Lauren in the living room, standing by the old fireplace. She had changed into an oversized sweater, probably one left behind years ago by a long-departed uncle or grandfather, and leggings that clung to her like memory. She looked like a woman caught halfway between two worlds, the corporate empress and the barefoot girl who once chased fireflies through the fields. Cal dropped the kindling beside the hearth mine. "If I get this going." She stepped aside, silently folding her arms to her chest. He worked quickly, hands practiced newspaper twisted into ropes, sticks layered carefully, logs crisscrossed with purpose. A few flicks of a match, a patient coaxing of flame, and the fire caught soft orange light flickered against the stone casting shadows that calced across Lauren's face. She sat down on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. Cal remained on the floor by the fire, letting its warmth seep into his spine. The quiet between them stretched not awkward, just wide. "Thank you," she said softly. For what he asked, not looking up, for not asking me to explain everything, for not filling every silence. Cal smiled faintly. Sometimes silence says more than talking ever could. She hesitated. "Do you believe people can start over?" He leaned back on his palms, eyes on the flames. "I think most people don't start over because they're afraid it means erasing who they were. But maybe it's not about erasing. Maybe it's just rewiring." "Rewiring," she repeated. "I like that." He glanced at her. "Old engines don't need to be scrapped. Sometimes they just need a new spark, new fuel, a little love." She laughed soft and surprised. "Do you use car metaphors for everything?" "Only when I'm nervous." She tilted her head. "Are you nervous?" He met her eyes a little. Why Cal didn't answer right away. The fire popped, sending a burst of embers up the flue. Because he said at last, "I don't know what happens when this moment ends. I don't know if you're going to disappear back into your world, and I don't know if I should want you to stay." She didn't answer right away, and Cal, maybe needing to fill the quiet, continued. "After my mom got sick," he said softly, "I dropped out of school. I needed work fast, and I landed a spot doing intake diagnostics at a Proterra Motor Service depot. Mostly hybrid systems, some early EV builds. I didn't have the degree, but I had the hands." He gave a faint smile, eyes flicking toward the fire. "That's where I learned the little things, how failure doesn't always scream at whispers. A faulty bracket here, a misaligned torque spec there. Machines lie if you don't listen close." Lauren tilted her head. "You worked on electric vehicles." Cal nodded, just long enough to know when something feels wrong under the hood. That instinct never really leaves you. She didn't say anything, but something shifted in her expression. Respect, perhaps, or something quieter. Lauren's gaze dropped to the blanket in her lap. "I don't know either," she admitted. "I've been pretending for so long. I don't remember who I am without the pressure." Cal turned slightly toward her. "Then maybe that's what this is? A place without pressure. No expectations, no deadlines, no polished version of me," she said exactly. She looked into the fire, her profile soft in the glow. "My father died of a heart attack at 60. Worked every day of his life trying to build something that could outlive him. I think he believed if he just worked hard enough, loved big enough, it would all balance out." Cal nodded. "Did it? I don't know. I took over Sinclair Motors and kept pushing, thinking maybe I could finish what he started. But somewhere along the way, I stopped knowing what the finish line looked like." Cal studied her face, tired but beautiful, proud but worn. "Maybe the finish line isn't the goal. Maybe it's just the moment you look around and realize you're finally breathing." She blinked slowly, then without warning, tears welled in her eyes. "I don't cry," she whispered. "You do now," he said gently. "I hate this," she said, wiping at her cheek with the sleeve of her sweater. "Feeling like everything I built is about to collapse. Feeling like I'm just untethered." Cal moved to sit beside her on the couch, careful not to make it feel like a gesture. "Just presence." "You're not collapsing," he said. "You're pausing. There's a difference. I've never paused before. First time for everything." Lauren leaned into him slightly, just enough for her shoulder to brush his. The contact was brief but grounding. "Do you ever think maybe the people who seem the strongest are just the ones best at hiding how lonely they are?" she asked. "All the time," Cal said. You'd be surprised how many people sit in my shop and spill everything. I think maybe people just want someone to listen. Not fix, just listen. Lauren looked up at him. Is that what you're doing now? He met her gaze. Yes. And for a moment there was nothing else. No titles, no money, no pass. Just a woman who forgot how to rest and a man who learned how to wait. The fire crackled, the silence stretched. And then slowly Lauren reached out and rested her hand on his. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a declaration. It was just touch, honest and human. Cal didn't move, didn't say a word. He just let it be. They sat that way for a long time, her head eventually drifting to his shoulder, his hand still beneath hers. In the corner of the room, the old clock ticked again for the first time in years. Outside, the wind rustled the dry leaves on the porch. Inside by the fire, two strangers began to find something they hadn't dared hope for. A sense of home, not in a house, not in a place, but in each other. Cal woke with the first light, his body stiff from having slept in a chair too small for someone his size. The fire in the hearth had long since died down to a soft glow of coals barely warm now. He rubbed the back of his neck and glanced toward the couch. Lauren was still there, wrapped in the same worn flannel blanket, her breathing soft and even. One hand rested lightly on the armrest, the other curled near her cheek. In the flickering shadows of the night before, she looked fragile. Now in the gentle blush of morning, she looked real. And for the first time since he'd accidentally driven off with the wrong woman, Cal didn't feel like a man out of place. He stood slowly, careful not to wake her, and walked to the kitchen. The floorboards creaked, everything in this house creaked, but Lauren didn't stir. He found the coffee can again, shook it just enough for one more pot. By the time the aroma drifted into the living room, she was sitting up, blinking slowly, hair tousled and eyes clearer than they had been in days. "You're still here," she said, voice rasped from sleep. Cal poured her a mug. "I figured walking out before dawn would send the wrong message." She took the cup with a grateful nod, cradling it in both hands as if it were the only warm thing left in the world. "Did you sleep?" she asked, in a manner of speaking. "I'm sorry. You didn't have to stay." He leaned against the doorway, sipping from his own mug. "Didn't have to." "Wanted to." Her eyes met his. Why, Cal hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because the truth came so easily it startled him. "Because I didn't want you to wake up alone." "Not after last night," she nodded once slowly. Then with a steadiness that surprised them both, she said, "Come see something." He followed her barefoot through the back door, out onto the porch where dew clung to the steps like morning lace. The field stretched wide before them, blanketed in gold and soft mist. The barn in the distance looked less like a ruin and more like something that might one day breathe again. Lauren pointed toward a tree at the edge of the yard. "That swing used to be mine. My father hung it himself. I fell off it once and broke my arm." Cried for hours, Cal looked at the faded wooden plank, the ropes frayed with time. "He carried me inside, humming some old Johnny Cash tune, sat with me the whole night while I cried over missing the summer festival. I think that was the moment I decided I wanted to build something too, something that would take care of people the way he took care of me." Cal said nothing. He knew better than to interrupt a memory, but somewhere along the line she continued. "I stopped building and started defending, fighting for control, for respect, for space at a table where I was never fully welcome. And now," he asked. She exhaled long and slow. "Now I don't want that table. I want a bench under that tree. A swing, a place where no one's trying to out-talk each other." Cal turned to her. "You think it's that simple?" "No," she admitted, "but I think I've made it more complicated than it has to be." They stood there in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, but reverent, as if something was unfolding, not just between them, but within them. "I have to go back today," she said after a while. "Not forever, just for now." Cal's chest tightened. He nodded, masking the sudden sting behind his eyes. "I have to face the board," she continued. "Face Richard. Face myself, you should," he said. "Running only works for so long." She looked at him, then her expression unreadable. "Will you be here when I come back?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the house, the weathered porch, the leaning fence, the dusty windows, and then back to her. "I can be," he said. "If that's what you want, I think it is." But he asked gently, "But I'm scared that when I go back, I'll slip into who I used to be, that I'll let them pull me under again." Cal stepped closer. "Then take something with you, something that reminds you who you really are." She smiled softly. "Like what?" He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a small rusted bolt. He'd picked it up from the porch steps the night before, probably fallen from some forgotten piece of furniture. He held it out to her. "It's useless, broken thread. But it still held something together once. Maybe it'll remind you that even broken things have purpose." She took it, fingers brushing his. "You're more than a mechanic, Cal, and you're more than a CEO." Lauren, a bird, chirped in the distance. The sun crested over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the land. She looked back toward the house. "I'll come back." Cal gave a quiet nod. "I'll keep the coffee warm." She laughed, genuine and light. "That's the best offer I've had in years." They went inside together, packed up what little she'd brought. Cal walked her to the car, opened the door like a gentleman, and stood there for a beat as she settled into the seat. Just before closing the door, she looked up at him. "This isn't goodbye." "No," he said. "Just see you soon." And as she drove off, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, Cal stood in the rising light of morning, holding a mug of cooling coffee and something else entirely. Hope. It was quiet again. But this time it didn't feel like absence. It felt like a beginning. The sound of city traffic struck Cal like a slap of cold water as he stepped onto the polished marble floor of Sinclair Motors' downtown headquarters. The building soared into the sky like it had something to prove, glass and steel arranged to impress, to intimidate. And it was working. He felt like a man who'd wandered into a palace with dirt still under his nails. He adjusted the collar of the only blazer he owned, a second-hand find that fit him reasonably well, if he didn't breathe too deep, and approached the front desk. The receptionist, sleek and efficient, gave him a glance that suggested he didn't belong. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, eyeing the calluses on his hands. "I'm here to see Lauren Sinclair," Cal replied, keeping his tone steady. "She asked me to come." The woman's brows lifted just barely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but she said Tuesday at noon." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, eyes scanning a screen. "There's nothing here, I'm sorry, but Miss Sinclair has a full schedule today." Cal nodded. "Mind letting her know Cal Bennett stopped by? I'll pass it along," she said already. Turning back to her screen, Cal stood there a moment longer than necessary. Then with a half shrug, he turned toward the door. "Cal." The voice cut through the sterile lobby like sunlight through clouds. He turned. Lauren stood on the landing of the grand staircase, flanked by two assistants in sleek black suits. She wore a sharply tailored navy blue dress, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense twist, makeup precise. Every inch of her screamed control, composure, command. But her eyes were different. She descended the stairs with grace, dismissing her assistants with a glance. "I'm sorry," she said, reaching him. "I didn't tell the desk. I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "I almost didn't," Cal admitted. "You look different. I had to," she said in here. "If you look soft, they'll eat you alive." He glanced around. "And yet here I am in a $40 blazer and boots I wore to fix a carburetor yesterday." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "And yet here you are." They stood in silence for a beat. The noise of the building pulsed around them, phones ringing, heels clicking, voices low and urgent. "Come with me," she said. He followed her past a glass conference room where a group of men in expensive suits argued over a projected chart. She led him down a quieter hallway and into a private office, hers. It was minimalist, cold, even with metallic accents and a sweeping view of the skyline. But on the desk just off to the side sat the rusty bolt he'd given her. Cal noticed. He didn't say a word, but something settled in his chest. "I wanted you to see it," she said, walking behind the desk. "This place, my world, it's impressive," he said honestly. It's exhausting, she replied, slipping out of her heels and kicking them under the desk, like she couldn't stand them a moment longer. And I'm tired of pretending I can do it all alone. Cal watched her standing barefoot on a carpet that probably cost more than his truck. You're not alone now, she leaned against the edge of the desk. I need your help. With what? I don't know the first thing about running a corporation. But you know people. You know how things work, how things break, how to fix them. He folded his arms. This isn't a carburetor, Lauren. No, she said. But the company's EV division is floundering. The designs are being manipulated by a contractor we hired. We suspect sabotage but can't prove it. We need someone who isn't on the payroll, someone who can see the problem for what it really is. Cal blinked. You want me to inspect your vehicles? I want you to inspect the situation. She said, go into the plant. Talk to the workers. Listen, you have an ear for the truth? Cal, you read people better than my board does data. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not qualified for this. I don't want someone qualified, she said, stepping closer. I want someone honest. There it was again, that steady gaze, the rawness beneath the polish. She wasn't just asking for help. She was trusting him. Not as a consultant, not as a favor, but because she believed in him. Cal exhaled slowly. Okay, I'll take a look. Relief washed over her features. She stepped back and smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. Thank you. A knock on the door interrupted them. It opened before Lauren could answer. A man stepped inside, tall, square-jawed, wearing the kind of tailored arrogance Cal had learned to spot from across a room. Lauren, the man said, his voice smooth. I've been trying to reach you, Richard, she replied coolly. Now's not a good time. Richard's eyes shifted to Cal, scanning him from boots to collar. Who's this? Cal extended a hand. Cal Bennett. Richard ignored it. Ah, the mechanic. Lauren's jaw tightened. Word travels, Richard continued. Especially when your fiancé walks out on a billion-dollar press conference and disappears into the countryside with a blue-collar mystery man? Cal's hands remained at his sides. His voice was calm. I fix engines. Sometimes that means I get my hands dirty. Richard smirked. Well, we wouldn't want our CEO covered in grease now, would we? Depends, Lauren cut in sharply, on whether you're more afraid of grease or the truth. Richard blinked. Lauren stepped closer to Cal, standing beside him. Cal is helping me with a serious issue in the EV division. You'll be briefed when I decide you need to be. Richard's smile faltered. We'll see what the board has to say. Lauren's eyes narrowed. The board will say what I tell them to. For now, I'd like to get back to my meeting. Richard gave a tight nod and left his cologne trailing behind him like an accusation. The door clicked shut. Cal let out a breath. So, that was him. Lauren rolled her eyes. Don't worry, he's not my fiancé anymore. You okay? I will be, she said. As long as you don't run. He looked at her. I'm here, aren't I? She smiled again. Just a flicker. But enough. Then let's get to work, she said. And just like that, the mechanic stepped into the boardroom and the billionaire stepped off her pedestal. Two worlds, one spark, and something neither of them saw coming. The Sinclair EV plant hummed with quiet intensity, like a machine just barely holding itself together. Steel frames moved along conveyor belts in choreographed silence. Robotic arms rotated with unfeeling precision. But to Cal, who'd spent years listening to engines breathe, the place didn't feel alive. He stood beside Derek Langston, the floor manager near the rear test bay, where a few prototypes were parked under faded tarps. Thanks for letting me poke around, Cal said, adjusting the visitor badge clipped to his collar. I'm not here to step on toes, just trying to understand what's going wrong from the ground up. Derek gave a small nod. Lauren trusts you. That's good enough for me. Just know things are tense. People are jumpy. We've had 3 test motors seize in the last month. Diagnostics can't pin it down. Cal squatted beside the nearest prototype, pulled back the tarp, and popped the hood. At first glance, everything looked clean, too clean. But then again, most things that failed quietly did. He leaned in closer, tracing his fingers along the engine mount, then paused. These torque brackets, he muttered, they're slightly misaligned. Subtle, but over time, that stress builds up, especially with heat cycling. Derek stepped closer. You think that's our smoking gun? I think it's a thread, Cal said, and if you tug it carefully, it might unravel something. He paused, then added, back when I worked intake diagnostics for Proterra Motors' hybrid division, we had issues like this: quiet changes, subpar brackets that passed visual inspection but cracked under real-world use. The kind of flaws you don't see unless you know what you're looking for. Derek blinked. You worked EVs before? Couple years, Cal said. Nothing glamorous, mostly field reports and failure assessments, but patterns stick with you. This here, it's familiar. Derek exhaled. Damn, we've been blaming the software updates. Not your code, Cal said. It's the hardware. And if I had to guess, the parts aren't coming from your usual vendors. The floor manager narrowed his eyes. That would fall under Travis Granger's purview. I'm not pointing fingers, Cal said quickly, but it wouldn't hurt to cross-check vendor logs. Look for inconsistencies. I'll have our procurement guys dig in. Derek said, already pulling out his phone. You might have just saved us another failure. Cal stood and dusted off his hands. Like I said, I'm just here to help. By the time he returned to Lauren's office, it was late afternoon. The sun slanted across her desk, and the city skyline behind her glowed like fire through glass. She looked up as he entered. You look like a man with questions. I've got a few, Cal said, taking a seat. Mostly about where your EV parts are coming from. Lauren set down her pen. Go on, I checked 3 test models. Cal began. All had the same issue. Torque brackets installed slightly off spec. Looks minor, but over time it causes stress fractures. We had similar issues at Proterra. Turns out someone had been sneaking in cheaper parts from an unvetted supplier. Her brow furrowed. You think that's what's happening here? I think it's possible. The changes are subtle, but someone with field experience could spot them. He hesitated. Travis Granger's name came up as the one overseeing the affected parts. Lauren exhaled slowly. Granger's been here over a decade. Sometimes loyalty hides complacency, Cal said gently. I'm not accusing him, but someone needs to check the chain. She stood, moving toward the window. Her voice was quieter now. It's not just about the parts, it's about trust. If someone inside is undermining what we're building. Cal stood too. Then you catch it now before it spreads. You've got good people on the floor. They want this company to succeed, but they need to see that leadership isn't blind. Lauren turned back to him, decision already forming behind her eyes. I want a full audit, starting with the EV division, procurement logs, vendor histories, internal emails. Everything. Cal nodded good. She looked at him a long moment. How'd you learn to spot things like that? You've never struck me as the corporate spy type. I'm not, he said, smiling slightly. Just a guy who's fixed enough machines to know when something doesn't hum the way it should. A pause then. You didn't have to come today, she said, I know. So why did you? Cal shrugged. Because you asked, and because you're building something worth showing up for. A quiet filled the room, not silence, but something deeper. Understanding, respect. Something just beginning to take root. Will you stay for the board meeting, Lauren asked. You sure they want a mechanic in the room? I'm sure I do, she said. He smiled. Then I'll be there. As he turned to go, she called after him. Cal, he looked back. I'm glad you didn't go back. His expression softened. Me too. The next morning, Cal arrived at the plant earlier than anyone expected. He wasn't scheduled to speak with the board until noon, but there was something he needed to do first. Something that didn't require a title. Just a pair of steady hands and the quiet kind of presence that earned respect without demanding it. He walked through the back entrance, nodded at security, and made his way to the service bay, where the old Mustang had been sitting untouched for months. Lauren had mentioned it in passing. Once Dad's old car, she'd called it. The one she'd driven to college before the company swallowed her life. Now it sat behind a tarp half covered in dust like a forgotten piece of her youth. Cal ran his fingers along the hood. The paint was chipped, but the bones were solid. He popped the hood, took a look, and nodded to himself. She needed work, but not much. The engine wasn't beyond saving, just neglected, like the woman who owned it. He rolled up his sleeves. Over the next few hours, he worked in silence. His tools spread around him like a makeshift altar. He drained old oil, replaced cracked belts, realigned the timing. There was something meditative about it, like prayer. Each turn of the wrench, each adjustment was a kind of offering. By mid-morning, a few plant workers had gathered nearby, watching, didn't know the visitor could turn a wrench. One of them joked, Cal glanced up. Didn't know CEOs let old Mustangs rust in peace? The others chuckled, and that was all it took. One stepped forward with a socket wrench. Mind if I give you a hand? Cal smiled. I'd appreciate it. They worked together, shoulders brushing, handing off tools like old friends. The car came to life, slowly groaning back into relevance. Grease stained their hands, sweat dotted their brows, but there was a sense of purpose in it. Lauren arrived just after 11. She stopped in the doorway, frozen for a second at the sight. Cal crouched beneath the hood of her father's car, sleeves rolled, oil smudged on his cheek. Around him, 5 plant workers, guys who had barely made eye contact with her during corporate walkthroughs, were laughing, talking, working with him like they'd known him for years. He looked up and saw her. Her breath caught. "You're early," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "I could say the same for you." She walked forward, heels clicking, then paused and looked at the Mustang. "You fixed it." Cal grinned. "Mostly needed a new starter. One of your guys had a spare. I figured your father wouldn't have wanted her to die under a tarp." She moved closer, fingertips grazing the dusty blue paint. Her eyes shimmered just a little. "He would have loved this. He built something that mattered," Cal said. "It deserved to run again." Lauren looked at him, and in that glance was everything unspoken between them. Gratitude, respect, and something deeper, something tender that hadn't quite taken shape but was beginning to breathe. "You've done more than fix a car," she said softly. Cal didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he opened the driver's side door. "Want to take it around the lot?" She laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. "You're serious?" "She's ready, but she might want to hear your voice again." Lauren hesitated only a second before sliding in behind the wheel. She touched the steering wheel like it was a relic. Then she turned the key. The engine roared to life with a throaty growl that echoed through the garage. The workers applauded. She looked over at Cal. "Come with me." Cal jumped into the passenger seat and, with a grin that could have broken glass, Lauren drove the Mustang out into the lot. Gravel crunched beneath them. Wind tore through the open windows, and for a moment she wasn't a CEO. She wasn't the woman everyone expected her to be. She was just Lauren Free. When they came to a stop at the far end of the lot, she cut the engine and sat there in silence for a moment. "I don't think I've felt this much like myself in years," she said. Cal leaned back. "That's the version of you I met. The one before the noise. I didn't know she still existed." She whispered. "She does," Cal said. "You just needed space to remember." She turned to him, eyes searching. "I'm scared of what happens next." Cal nodded. "You're about to walk into a room full of men who think they know better than you. You're about to take back your company. You should be scared. That means you're about to do something that matters." Lauren exhaled slowly. "And what about us?" Cal didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, not as someone who needed saving, not as someone to fix, but as someone he was slowly coming to love. "I don't know what this is yet," he said honestly, "but I know I'm not done being part of it." Her smile was quiet. "Grateful? Neither am I." They sat in the quiet, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. "Come to the meeting," she said. "You sure the board wants a mechanic in the room?" "No," she said, "but I do. You're the only one who's seen this company from every angle. You've listened when no one else would." Cal nodded. "Then I'll be there." As they drove back toward the building, Lauren rested one hand lightly on the gear shift, the other near his knee. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. And Cal, who had once thought he'd spend his life under cars and forgotten in garages, felt something shift. He hadn't just fixed her car. He'd reminded her she was allowed to feel alive. And maybe she was doing the same for him. The boardroom at Sinclair Motors was as cold and glossy as a brand new showroom model. Everything gleamed, but none of it felt alive. Long glass table, leather chairs, a skyline backdrop too perfect to be real. Cal sat at the far end, trying not to fidget with the cuff of his jacket, which still smelled faintly of engine oil, no matter how many times he washed it. Lauren sat at the head of the table, poised but not rigid. She wore a deep charcoal suit, her hair loose around her shoulders, less polished, more her. She was calm, but Cal knew the signs of tension, the way her fingers tapped silently against the table, the occasional twitch of her jaw. This wasn't just another meeting. This was war. The boardroom filled with men in cufflinks and tailored indifference. Richard Morgan entered last with all the confidence of someone used to winning without a fight. He barely glanced at Cal, but the smirk on his face told Cal exactly how he felt about his presence here. Lauren stood. "Before we begin, I'd like to address something directly," she said. "Voice even, for weeks our EV division has been bleeding money and performance. We've blamed supply chains, labor shortages, and market conditions, but the truth is far worse." She tapped the tablet in front of her. A slide flicked onto the large screen behind her, showing side-by-side images of standard parts and those recently installed in the prototypes. "This isn't a design flaw," she continued. "It's sabotage internal calculated, quiet enough to avoid detection, but destructive enough to tank a division." There was a murmur of shock. A few board members leaned forward, suddenly alert. "We traced the parts back to an unapproved vendor," Lauren said. "And that vendor has financial ties to one of our own." She turned slowly toward the end of the table. "Travis Granger." Travis blanched, then scoffed. "That's a wild accusation, it's not." Cal said, standing now, "I personally inspected 5 affected engines. The alterations were subtle, designed to pass a quick inspection, but guaranteed to fail under real stress. I also spoke to workers who saw the unauthorized shipments arrive often at night, always through Granger's team." The room went quiet, Lauren added. "We have footage, logs, names." Granger rose, eyes narrowing. "You're taking the word of a mechanic over a department head. I'm taking the word of someone who doesn't have a stake in the lie," Lauren said coolly, "and who's earned more trust in a week than some of you have in years." Granger gathered his papers and stormed out, but the damage was done. Silence lingered in his wake. Then Richard cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "while this witch hunt makes for dramatic theater, I hope we're not forgetting the broader picture. Sinclair Motors isn't a passion project, it's a business. Investors don't care about underdog stories or foundry floor camaraderie, they care about numbers." Lauren's jaw tightened, Richard continued. "And right now the numbers are fragile. Bringing in outsiders' emotional speeches, exposés, it's risky, it shakes confidence." Cal stood again before Lauren could respond. "With all due respect, Mr. Morgan, confidence was already shaken. People on the floor didn't trust leadership long before I got here, but they do trust someone who shows up, listens, and gets their hands dirty." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're a mechanic. You fix cars, not companies." Cal didn't flinch. "Maybe, but companies are made of people. And the moment you forget that you're just building machines with no soul." A heavy silence fell over the room. Lauren looked at each board member in turn. "We've spent too long building from spreadsheets instead of vision. It stops now. I'm restructuring the EV division. Derek Langston will take temporary leadership. All new projects will go through third-party audit, and moving forward." She glanced at Cal. "We're listening to more than numbers." There were murmurs of agreement, a few nods. Even Richard, for all his venom, looked momentarily quieted. The meeting adjourned shortly after, and Lauren exhaled only once the room had emptied. Cal walked over, placing a steady hand on her back. "You were incredible," he said. She turned to him, eyes shining, not with triumph, but with something far more human, exhaustion. "I feel like I just ran a marathon barefoot through fire." He chuckled. "Well, you didn't trip, and you lit the fire yourself." She laughed softly. "God, I needed that." But just as quickly, her smile faded. "Cal," earlier when Richard said those things. He shook his head. "Don't know I need to say this." She looked up at him, vulnerable in a way that felt more intimate than anything else they'd shared. "I let him get in my head. The way he looked at you, the way they all looked at you, it reminded me of how different our worlds are. And for a second, I wondered if bringing you into this was unfair." Cal nodded slowly. "It is different. I don't belong in those rooms." "I know that." She flinched. "So what does that mean?" "It means," he said gently, "I'll never be your equal on paper, not in money or degrees or legacy, but I know how to show up, I know how to care, and I know when something's worth staying for." Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered, "that I'll mess this up, that I'll pull you into a world that'll tear you down." Cal brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Then don't pull me. Walk with me, one step at a time." She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Coming here. Coming into my storm." Cal smiled softly. "No, because sometimes the storm's where you find the truth." They stood like that for a long moment, two people from different worlds holding each other in the quiet after the quake. And though no promises were spoken, something far more powerful was taking shape between them, a willingness to fight together. 3 days passed. 3 days without a call, without a message, without so much as a word from Lauren Sinclair. Cal didn't blame her. Not really. The boardroom had been a battlefield, and though she'd walked out victorious, no one left that kind of fight unscarred. He knew what silence after the storm felt like. It wasn't cowardice, it was processing. Still, it didn't stop him from glancing at his phone every few hours, or listening for the sound of tires crunching up the gravel outside his small garage back in Hudson Ridge. But all he heard was wind and the faint hum of an old radio in the corner. Cal went back to work. He replaced a serpentine belt on a '97 Ford, changed brake pads on a minivan, driven by a single mom he knew from high school, and cleaned oil off his shirt collar more times than he could count. He smiled. He said good morning to his regulars. He stayed busy, but something inside him stayed parked idle. Until Tuesday, it was late afternoon, when he heard the unmistakable low rumble of an engine he hadn't heard in years. Not the growl of a pickup, not the purr of a European import, it was her. The Mustang. Cal stepped out of the garage, wiping his hands with a rag, just in time to see the blue car glide to a stop in front of his shop. Sunlight caught the windshield just right, and for a second it was like something out of a dream. Then the door opened, and Lauren stepped out. No heels, no suit, just jeans, boots, and a faded denim jacket over a white t-shirt. Her hair was loose and windblown. She looked like the girl she used to be, the one who'd swung barefoot on her father's old tire swing. But there was something new in her eyes, too. Strength, yes, but softened. "Nice wheels," Cal said, tossing the rag over his shoulder. She smiled. "Runs like she never sat still a day." He walked toward her, slow and cautious. "What brings you to my side of the world?" Instead of answering, she reached into the passenger seat and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to him. Cal opened it. Inside was a folded document, a vehicle title. His name was printed across the top. He blinked. "You're giving me the car." Lauren shrugged one shoulder. "You brought her back to life, figured it was only right. But this car, it was your dad's." She met his gaze, and he would have liked you. He would have seen what I see. Cal looked down at the title again, then back at her, which as Lauren took a breath. Someone who doesn't quit, who listens, who fixes things most people walk away from, including me. A pause, heavy, honest. "I disappeared for a few days," she continued. "I needed to be sure I wasn't just clinging to something because it felt good in the middle of a storm." Cal nodded slowly. "And now I'm sure I don't want this. What we have to be a chapter. I close when the fire dies down. I want it to be the beginning of something steady. Not flashy, not perfect, but real." Cal swallowed hard. "I didn't know if you'd come back." She stepped closer, her voice lower now. "That's because I didn't know if I could. I've spent so long leading from the front, I forgot what it feels like to reach back, to ask someone to walk beside me, to let someone care." Cal searched her eyes. "Do you want that now?" She nodded. "I do, and I'm ready to do the work. On the business, on myself, on us." The U.S. hung in the air like a promise. Cal looked at the Mustang, then at her, and then down at his grease-stained hands. "You sure you want to tie your life to a guy who smells like motor oil and owns 3 flannel shirts?" Lauren smiled, stepping into him, resting a hand lightly on his chest. "Cal, you're the only person I know who can walk into a boardroom, outsmart a saboteur, fix a classic engine, and still look me in the eye without asking for anything in return." She tilted her head, teasing. "And I happen to like motor oil. It smells like integrity." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're something else, maybe," she said. "But I think I'm finally becoming someone I can like, again. Thanks to you." Cal grew quiet, then lifted the envelope slightly. "So what am I supposed to do with this?" She grinned. "Drive it, Keep it or sell it and open your own garage. Whatever future you want. Cal, no strings. He folded the document carefully and tucked it into his back pocket. What if the future I want includes you? She stepped even closer now, voice barely above a whisper. Then we start there. The moment hung quiet, warm electric. Cal reached out and took her hand, rough fingers wrapping gently around hers. And there in front of the little garage that had seen more rust than romance they kissed. No fireworks, no crowd, just the soft sigh of wind through trees and the hum of an engine cooling beside them. It wasn't a grand ending, it was a beginning. A mechanic, a billionaire. Two people who had nothing in common except for the belief that some things once broken can still be made whole. Together, the leaves had begun to turn in Hudson Ridge. Summer so full of fire and noise had finally given way to the hush of early autumn. Golden light draped the hills like a worn quilt, and the trees lining the Sinclair farmhouse blazed in reds and oranges. The kind of quiet that wrapped around you not with silence, but with meaning. Cal pulled into the gravel drive in his Mustang. At least that's what the title said now. He still couldn't quite believe it. The engine purred smoothly thanks to a few last tweaks he'd made out of habit, and he parked beneath the old oak tree just as a breeze scattered a handful of crimson leaves across the hood. The house had changed, not in a dramatic way. It still leaned a little. The paint was still faded, but the porch had been repaired. The swing hung steady. The lights inside glowed warm and inviting. Lauren's truck sat parked to the side, half loaded with lumber and tools as if she'd only just taken a break. She emerged from the side yard a moment later, sleeves rolled up, a paintbrush in hand, and a streak of green on her cheek. Cal grinned. You missed a spot. She wiped at it absently, smearing it worse, then laughed when she caught his smile. It's a new look. Thought I'd start a trend. CEO meets lumberjack. He walked toward her, slow and sure. I like it. Lauren looked at him with something deeper than affection. There was a steadiness to her gaze now, a softness that came not from weakness, but from wholeness. I thought you'd be in the city today. He said I was, she replied, early meeting. Then I told the board I wouldn't be available for the rest of the week. He raised an eyebrow. That went over. Well, I bet. She shrugged, unfazed. They'll adjust. I'm done living by other people's clocks. She gestured to the farmhouse. I want this place finished by the first frost. It's becoming something again. Not just a memory. Cal stepped beside her, nodding as he looked around. The garden beds had been cleared. The barn roof was half repaired. A stack of lumber waited beneath a tarp. You're doing good work, he said. So are you, she replied. I saw the photos of the garage you're building. 2 bays, a new lift, an office with a real coffee machine. He smiled. The sign goes up next week. Bennett Auto and Custom. Took a long time to believe I deserved something with my name on it. You do. They stood there in the quiet for a long moment. Then Lauren asked gently, do you miss it? The way things were before me? Cal shook his head. No, not even a little. Not even your quiet, predictable life. He laughed. I still have that. Mostly. Except now it comes with coffee mugs that don't match, and a woman who insists on playing Johnny Cash while we work on fences. She smiled. He was my dad's favorite. I know, Cal said. That's why I don't mind. She turned to face him fully now, the afternoon light catching in her eyes. You changed my life, Cal. Not with flowers or grand gestures, just by showing up again and again. Quietly, faithfully. He swallowed. You didn't need changing, just remembering. Lauren stepped closer, took his hands. Do you remember that day in front of the tower? When I told you don't go back? Pretty hard to forget, he said. I meant it in a panic back then. A reaction. But now, I mean it with intention. Don't go back, not to smallness, not to hiding, not to thinking you're only meant to serve, to fix, to disappear when the job is done. She looked at him deeply. I want you here. Not just as the man who helped me heal, but as the man I want to build a life with. Cal didn't speak for a moment. His chest tightened, not with doubt, but with emotion. Clean, strong. Real. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. This time I choose to stay. Lauren smiled, and it was different now, settled at peace, blooming with quiet joy. A wind rustled through the trees, and the porch swing moved lazily. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. A child laughed. The world turned slow and steady. "Come inside," she said, lacing her fingers with his. "I made soup, might have burned the bottom, but I tried." He grinned. "You always did prefer fire to finesse." They walked up the steps together, side by side, like they'd done it 1,000 times. Inside, the kitchen smelled of herbs and something vaguely singed, but Cal didn't care. He cared about the sound of her laughter as she tried to scrape the pot, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she got flustered, the way she still looked at him like he was exactly enough. They ate by the window, the golden light pouring in as dusk settled gently over the hills. And when the stars began to prick the sky, Cal took her hand again. "Lauren, yes, I've got a theory. Let's hear it. I think sometimes the wrong road is the one that gets you home." She smiled at that and her eyes shimmered. "Yes," she whispered. "And sometimes the wrong car takes you to the right person." They leaned in, foreheads touching, and just like that, there was no more fear, no more pretending, just love, real, steady healing. Love. The kind that doesn't need fanfare. The kind that comes quietly, fixes what's broken, and stays. Where are you watching from today? We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this story touched your heart the most? Share your reflections in the comments below. We read everyone. If you enjoy stories filled with warmth, second chances, and emotional depth, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for spending your time with us. Your presence here means more than you know. We'll see you in the next story.